All right, folks, we got a jam-packed show for you today. Dominating the crime news this week, Bryan Kohberger accepted a plea deal in the fatal stabbings of 4 in Idaho. Some verdicts have been returned. Well, all the verdicts in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. We're going to talk about that. A suspect has been identified in Idaho that killed himself after a firefighter ambush. We're definitely going to cover that. Cartel violence has left 20 dead in Mexico. Some of these people hanging from a bridge. You're going to want to listen to this story. A man drugs and smothers his wife in Arizona. The woman had dementia and she was in a nursing facility. South Carolina had a deputy get shot in another ambush. This week, we're going to be covering a child falls overboard on a Disney cruise line and is saved by her father. We're going to cover that story. Escapee Antoine Massey has finally been caught in New Orleans and KJ loses a bet. We're going to cover that. And a Louisiana man has been caught after stealing an ambulance parked outside of a hospital. We're going to tell you all about that wacky crime. And we're going to wrap up with why July 4th is the most violent day of the year. We got some really good insight on why that is. So stick with us and welcome everyone to CrimeWire Weekly. I'm Jim Chapman.
And I'm Kelly Jennings.
And look, we switched it up a little bit this week, Kelly, and I told everybody kind of a little synopsis of all the headlines this week so they know what they're about to hear, kind of reel them in a little bit.
I like that. And I like, hey, it's good to know what we're about to get into. You get in the mindset. You can know what you got to deal with.
That's exactly right. And this has been one wild week in the world of crime. A lot of big stories have been just fluttered through the internet.
Tragic stories, too.
Tragic stories.
Just out-the-box wildness happening. You know,
there's no doubt about it. In some stories, it'll just flat piss you off. Mm-hmm. And we're going to let Kelly start this off with one of those type of stories right now. Tell us, Kelly.
Indeed. So we're going to go to Idaho. And if you have followed this case to date, you're going to probably understand our sentiment and where we're coming from. If not, let's get into this. So, Bryan Kohberger has accepted a plea deal that will spare him the death penalty in the slayings of 4 University of Ohio students in November of 2022, according to a letter sent to the families' victims by prosecutors. Koberger is charged with 4 counts of murder in the stabbings of Ethan Chapman, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Gonzalez, who were killed at a home in Moscow, Idaho, during the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. In the letter, portions of which were shown by Mogen's father, Ben Mogen, the county prosecutor's office says attorneys for Kohberger requested a plea deal, and Kohberger accepted it. The letter says Kohberger agreed to plead guilty to all the counts against him and that he would be sentenced to, quote, 4 consecutive, which means back-to-back, life sentences on the 4 murder counts and would waive all rights to appeal. The letter also says that if Kohberger enters guilty pleas as expected at an upcoming hearing, we anticipate that this case will be set for sentencing in late July. If the defendant does not enter guilty pleas as expected, we are prepared to proceed to trial as planned. The family of one of the other victims, Kaylee Gonzalez, also said they received a letter about the plea deal. Kohberger had been fighting the charges. His trial was expected to begin in August following several delays. The murders terrorized the community, and for weeks, the hunt for a suspect was shrouded in mystery. Kohberger was arrested 6 weeks later at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. According to the police affidavit, DNA evidence linked him to a knife sheath found at the crime scene. At the time of his arrest, Kohberger was a PhD criminology student and teaching assistant at Washington State University's Pullman campus, which is about 15 minutes from the Moscow, Idaho area. Ben Mogen said he was relieved to get the letter about the plea deal. And this is a direct quote. "If you get a quick death sentence, then you know you don't have to spend decades thinking about how terrible you made the world," he said. "We can actually put this behind us and not have these future dates and future things that we don't want to have to be at, that we shouldn't have to be at, that have to do with this terrible person," he said. "We get to just think about the rest of our lives and have to try and figure out how to do it without Maddie and without the rest of the kids." The Gonzalez family, however, said they are beyond furious at the state of Idaho in a Facebook post shortly after the news broke. "They have failed us. This was very unexpected," they wrote. The family said that the prosecutor's office vaguely mentioned a possible plea on Friday without seeking our input and presented the plea on Sunday. The family has pushed for Koberger to face the death penalty. The introduction of this plea deal just weeks before the scheduled trial is both shocking and cruel, Aubrey Gonsalves, the youngest member of the family, wrote in a letter shared on Facebook. Bryan Kohberger facing a life in prison means he would still get to speak, form relationships, and engage with the world. Meanwhile, our loved ones have been silenced. In another statement released Tuesday, the Gonsalves family said they will not stop fighting for the life that was stolen unjustly. We stand strong that it is not over until a plea is accepted, they wrote. At a bare minimum, please require a full confession, full accountability, location of the murder weapon, confirmation the defendant acted alone, and the true facts of what happened that night. Martin Diaz, an attorney for the Kohberger family, said in a statement provided to CBS News Tuesday evening on behalf of the family that in light of the recent developments, the Kohbergers are asking members of the media for privacy, respect, and responsible judgment during this time. We will continue to allow the legal process to unfold with respect to all parties and will not release any comments or take any questions. The trial was originally going to be held in the county where the murders occurred, but the judge later ordered the trial to be moved over concerns the media coverage and statements from local officials would make it impossible for Kohberger to receive a fair trial. The Idaho Supreme Court moved the proceedings to Boise. Kohberger's defense team had previously tried to remove the death penalty as a possible sentence if he was convicted, but County Judge Stephen Hippler denied their motion back in November of 2024. Among the evidence prosecutors were planning to present was Kohberger's Amazon purchase history showing he bought a K-bar knife with sheath and sharpener, which they claimed matched the sheath found at the crime scene. Prosecutors also claimed touch DNA matching DNA taken from Kohberger was found on the sheath. The defense tried to exclude the touch DNA evidence, but Hippler denied that request. Prosecutors were also planning to present surveillance video of Kohberger's car and cell phone data that they said tied him to the vicinity of the killings. Last week, the judge denied a motion by Kohberger's lawyers to argue that 4 alternate perpetrators could have committed the murders. The judge called it rank speculation and said nothing links these individuals to the homicides. So we have a clip for you to listen to via News Nation of Kaylee Gonsalves' father reacting to the news of Kohberger accepting this plea deal. Listen to the emotion here.
But I wanted you to have your say. I wanted you to be able to say out loud for everyone to hear what this means to you and your family.
This is anything but justice. This is the opposite of our will. There was no majority believing that this was acceptable. I want to honor all the police officers, the FBI, and all the people that worked their tail off. The failure is at the court level, 100%. But the men and the boots on the ground and the women that were out there working, I want to honor everything that they did for our children, 100%. The fault is in leadership and the people that you place this evidence upon. They were weak. They decided to play God and decide what this man's decision should be, and not a jury. Not his peers. They, so that's where we are today.
Walk me through what happened. Brian Enton, did some really great reporting at the top of this show here. But tell me from your perspective how the last 3 days have played out.
I would say ever since Hippler's demanded an independent investigation, they couldn't get away from this case fast enough. They've done everything to make this case go away. So I don't know what that entails, but he said he was going to have an independent investigator, and all of a sudden we seemed like we were on rails to get rid of this case and make a plea deal. I mean, he's guilty. We all know he's guilty. There's more than enough evidence, but it's tough. It's tough to put a community through this, and it could be bad for reputations and business identities, and there's fallout. But this isn't the will of the victims. This is just one person making a decision, and it doesn't reflect what we were asking for.
Steve, did anybody ever call you from the prosecutor's office to just personally discuss this with you? Did anybody offer to meet with you in person to go over this potential plan?
We have meetings all the time on, particularly a lot of times on Friday. No. We had this regular meeting that we have to try basically do an update of what's going on, where things are at, because Idaho is actually an amazing state where it really does care about people. We just get one or two, people who just don't care about the victims and don't care about justice. And it's easy to take the weight out. It's easy to make an excuse and say, I'm doing this for the victims, even though I've never interviewed the victims. I've never really talked to them to find out what their true feelings are. So here we are. We're stuck and we can't get out of it. I ask your audience if anybody knows Judge Hippler, reach out to him and ask him to put his foot down and not accept this offer. It doesn't reflect anything in Idaho. This is not justice. We had an outsider come to our community, kill our kids in their sleep while they're getting a college education, doing everything that they should do, and we don't have the courage to hold him accountable. No plea deal. Let's go for this guy. 100%. Let's do it. And that's how this family stands.
Steve, I know that, it's no secret your daughter Kaylee was so close with Maddie Mogan, best of friends. And I know that you got to know the Mogan family as well. Have you spoken with the Mogan family, and do you know what their reaction is to this plea decision?
We actually just had a meeting with the prosecution and just tore into it and made it clear that we were not in support of this, but we also invited other families into that. And I'll let them speak on their own that were part of that meeting, but we are in no way alone on this. Multiple families believe the same as we do, but I want to honor their abilities to speak independently and as their child. So I don't want to cross that line, but all I will say is there was no majority for this decision at all. And if they're not working for us, they're working against us, guys. I mean, we have to wake up to this. I mean, we have to hold people accountable. Coeur d'Alene just had a shooting where we attacked our firemen. People need to stand up to these monsters and stop freaking bowing down to them and giving them childcare. I mean, prison is nothing but adult childcare. You get free vision, you get free dental, you get free meals, you get AC, room and board, cable TV, internet access. It's ridiculous what we give our prisoners. Better than what we treat our vets. Our vets coming back from war with missing limbs. This is unacceptable.
All right, Jim, thoughts on that? What you think?
I'm disgusted about this. When I first saw this, I assumed that this was the wishes of the family, because you will see that sometimes with death penalty cases where a deal is made and primarily it's at the wishes of the family affected. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to relive. Right. They don't want to relive that. And who am I to judge whether someone should be made to relive the absolute fucking butchering of their kid? So when I saw this, that was my thought. Then the reports started coming out, and come to find out, not only was one family, but the majority of families in this case were upset, very upset that this was done essentially behind their back. They were made aware of it, and it was their contention that they really had no choice in the matter. So it makes me wonder, and I'm purely speculating here. Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder if some of this evidence may have been attained in a not so legal way. Let's just say that. Maybe some of that familia DNA, they didn't really have the right to go on someone's property and dig through their trash and get without a warrant, or maybe they didn't have a warrant. I don't know. Maybe they did. Something is amiss.
You talked about maybe they didn't have good procedure whenever they got the trash to get the DNA. Well, just if people aren't familiar with this, you have a thing called curtilage, which is going to be basically the area between your sidewalk and the street. So when you bring your trash can and you put it there to be picked up, that in and of itself is not a protected area, and you can collect things from cartilage to get the DNA. It's done all the time, and it's not frowned upon. It's actually a procedure that's pretty common.
Well, and it has to be in a certain spot.
Right. I'm just saying. So, I mean, it's not like you're stealing trash. I mean, if it's in a certain spot, whatever.
No. Right.
So where I'm coming in on this altogether is we've worked all this time, and I say we as the collective, right? We trust in this process. We trust that you're going to do a bang-up job. We found the guy. There's no doubt in majority of people's minds whether he did it or not. Now it's coming down to what should a penalty look like. And my personal opinion is that conviction does not equal justice. And I'm saying that through the scope of being a victim, because just because someone is convicted, for example, and let's say they went to jail for, not for this case, but let's say you go to jail for 30 days for something that you did, that doesn't fix what you did to me. That doesn't undo what you did to me. And then begs the question, okay, well, what do you want to do? Well, in this case specifically, this is exactly what the death penalty is for. It's for cases like this. If this does not qualify, nothing would qualify for a death penalty case. And the death penalty should not be a bargaining chip for prosecutors who I feel lack a backbone right now. They're getting that easy conviction that shows a win on his record, which, by the way, the prosecutor is going to retire after this, from what I read. So you get this easy conviction, and then he doesn't have to say a lot of anything. He really doesn't. If he confesses, great. We already know that. No shit, Sherlock. These families want some semblance of why. Why did you do this? What could draw you here? And all he has to do is say, yeah, I did it. We already know that. He knows that. He held out till the very end because the death penalty was on the table. He waited to see if he was going to get any type of plea deal from the prosecution, which he did not get offered from the prosecution to come in and say, hey, well, why don't we do this, that, and the other? Then he became a total chicken shit and wanted to come up with this fake, oh, there might have been other people that did it, which tells me he's a fucking liar. And then after that gets shot down, then the prosecution turns around and offers a plea deal without notifying the family ahead of time, so that they can get the win. This is not a win as far as families are concerned. There is no winning. The families will never win. What this was that his life should be put on the line. And I'm going to add one more thing to that. I saw people came after me on TikTok, okay, because I made a TikTok about this one. And they're like, well, I just have to disagree with you. Life in prison, the family doesn't have to worry, blah, 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 blah. Well, let's go back to what that little sister said, because she nailed it. Because as a person who has worked at a maximum security penitentiary where there is death row and there is population prisoners alike, population prisoners still have a life. They can talk to their families. They can watch TV. They can play games. They can make hobby craft, for example, where we are, and they can sell it at a rodeo. I'm not saying he's coming here, but I'm just giving you an example. They can be a part of things. They continue to study. They can do schooling. They can do a lot of things and build a life in prison. It may not be ideal, but it's still a life. The death row experience, and I want listeners to hear me on this, the death row experience is a motherfucker. They are locked down 23 hours a day. They are allowed 1 hour out to walk a tier or go outside, weather permitting, in a cage. It is a miserable life. Miserable. And giving him, I don't care if you give him 100 life sentences, he still gets to have a life. And it's as a parent, I side with the dad on this, and I side with the sister. It's a cop-out.
And we know now that he killed these 4 people, and I want everybody to hear this clip. This is the plead from Bryan Kohberger, actually pleading to all 4 deaths as guilty. Here's that.
Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Koberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonsalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapman, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
You just heard that clip, and no matter what you think, in this case, you just heard a guy plead to the murders of 4 people. And Kelly's right. He gets to live, and they don't. And the family didn't like it. It's very upsetting to me. I'm obviously very upsetting to Kelly. It's disgusting.
I'll say this. I try to put myself in other people's shoes. I do. And my heart also hurts for the Koberger family, like the parents, because they didn't do this. You know, they're in a bad position too. It seems like they're respectful. They said, we're just not going to say anything. You know, nothing they could say anyway would be well taken.
They will get their day in court, and they will get to look this asshole in the face and tell him what they think about him, because during the sentencing, what do we have, Kelly? What's it called?
Victim impact statement.
Victim impact statements. And in those victim impact statements, I can't wait for them. I can't wait for these people to get the opportunity to look this guy in the face and tell him what a monster he is.
And I hope that they are given ample time.
Let's move on to New York City, and we're going to talk about, wow, the case, maybe the trial of all trials so far in this century, and that is Sean Diddy Combs, who was found not guilty of racketeering and sex trafficking. He was convicted of some lesser charges, and when I say lesser, I mean lesser. Of all the charges he could be convicted of, those were the ones he wanted to get convicted of if he had to be convicted of anything. Of course, the global hip-hop titan whose federal trial unveiled harrowing testimony that accused him of sexual abuse against women and forced drug-dazed freak-offs was acquitted just Wednesday on racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Now, the jury's verdict was delivered on the 3rd day of deliberations. They found Diddy not guilty of 1 count of racketeering conspiracy and 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. But they did find him guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. This verdict, as I told you, it's seen as a win for Combs and his defense team, which they did not call a single witness during the 7-week trial. And after the verdict was read, his family stood in the background clapping and cheering. Combs then fell to his knees in prayer. As he left the courtroom, he told his family, "Thank you, I love you." Teeny Garagos, one of Combs' attorneys, actually broke out in tears. His lead attorney, Mark Agnafilo, he made a fist in triumph as the defense team hugged each other and hugged his family. And it really made me think about I was just about as disgusted as when the O.J. Simpson trial took place. And Johnny Cochran, who, regardless of what you think of Johnny Cochran, probably the best attorney I've ever seen at relating to a jury. Mm-hmm. That sucker could just talk to people, man. He was extremely talented as a defense attorney. But when they announced the not guilty plea in the O.J. Simpson trial, the first thing you heard was a shriek and a bunch of crying from the sister of Ron Goldman, yes, who was, murdered brutally. And the second thing you see is Johnny Cochran scream, "Yes," and pat O.J. on the shoulder. And look, there was no celebration there. Everybody knew O.J. did it. But even if you're excited about a win, how could you do that with somebody in the audience screaming and crying because her brother did not get justice? I will never understand. Now, to clear it up quickly, Combs is still facing considerable prison time at sentencing, the prostitution transportation charge, so he could get 20 years with those 2 counts. And I want to say this. Initially, yesterday, when this verdict came down, and I was not surprised. I did not feel like they proved beyond a reasonable doubt the counts that they needed to prove. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm saying the prosecution did not prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. The ones he was convicted of, I agree with. I assumed initially he wasn't going to do any jail time, but something shocking, in my opinion, happened yesterday. The defense attorney basically said, all right, it's time for him to get out of jail until sentencing, considering he's only charged with 2 minor counts in comparison to what he was facing life in prison. Mm-hmm. And the judge said, nope, he's not getting out of jail till his sentencing. That told me something. they got the right ass for Sean Combs. And I think that Sean Combs is going to do every day of that 20 years. I think they're going to sentence him to the max in both cases. I think they're pissed that they lost this case. The prosecution certainly is going to ask for the max of 20 years. And in this trial, you heard the defense team own the fact that Sean Combs was a abuser of women, a physical abuser. And they said that in court. We own that. We can't get away with that. He beats women. Well, in a court of law, you're supposed to have a blindfold and you're supposed to ignore all these other circumstances that aren't necessarily part of what you're getting prosecuted with. But we're also human. And I guarantee you that judge, he didn't like that.
How many
he's gonna
years?
make him pay,
How many
I think.
years has Diddy been behind bars?
About a year.
Awaiting trial. All right. So worst situation imaginable is they do them consecutively, which would be the full 20 years. Then they're going to give him credit for the year time served, which means he would serve 19. Now, what happens here is they can give him good time for that, which means if basically you're good, then they'll knock time off of your sentence. So they also offer things called double good time. So what you could do on average is you could divide it in half and say, at least he would spend half of that. So what's half of 19?
So, what is that?
It's like 9
and
9. It'd be like 9 something. So that would be, in my opinion, worst case scenario, which is unbelievable. I have seen people do 15 to 20 years for much less, in my opinion, in the whole totality of this case. But the judge could also say, no, I'm gonna sentence you to max, but we're going to run them concurrently, which means they would run at the same time, which means it's a 10-year flat sentence. But again, he can be getting that good time.
And he'd be out less than 5, which was my first inclination. But the fact that he made him stay in jail makes me think they're gonna sentence him to some pretty hard time. Now let me flip what you said just a little bit and put some perspective on it.
Go for it.
We all know Diddy's a piece of shit, and he needs to be in jail the rest of his life for all the stuff he wasn't convicted of.
And to protect people in the future, honestly, because he's dangerous.
Correct. So I'm not defending Diddy here. But what I'm doing is I'm taking Diddy out of the equation and I'm giving you the charges he was convicted of.
Right.
He was basically convicted of paying prostitutes to get on a plane, come to him, and have a freak off with him and his girlfriend.
Right.
That, when it's all said and done, most people that get caught with prostitutes do no jail time.
Yeah.
None. If it was someone that was just a normal person and they were being charged with this, if maybe they got online and flew someone from Las Vegas into Louisiana for the purpose of prostitution, that's the same charge he got. I don't see anybody really getting 10 years for that in normal circumstances. So if he ends up with just what you said, 9 years, let's say, in prison for 2 instances of flying someone in to have sex with him and his girlfriend, I would say that's a pretty hard time for those charges. Doesn't mean he doesn't deserve life for all the other stuff, but he was not found guilty of the other
But hence
stuff.
why the judge has discretion here and can, minimum to max. I know this, a whole lot of people didn't testify, and that has to make a defense team that doesn't bring one witness, not one. Isn't that what you just said?
None.
None. On what planet could you not put one person up without worrying what they might say? Really, really weigh that.
Well, in hindsight, it seems like the right call.
It was.
It seems like a smart call.
Obviously, but you don't trust people enough, that favorable witness, that people that would come for your favor. You're afraid. What it tells me is they were much more afraid of the cross and what might get brought up on that.
I agree with that.
And
you didn't even have character, like his mother didn't get called up to speak as a character witness for Diddy.
Because his mama wouldn't have outweighed everything they had already seen. It was fruitless. And all it would do was, in essence, piss people off more that, okay, of course you brought your mama up, bring somebody else up. So it was strategically smart, in my opinion, not bring anybody versus bringing people inherently that would protect you. There's a whole lot of people breathing a sigh of relief, I would say, in the celebrity realm.
I would agree.
And if you beat the feds, Wow.
Yeah, that's the big thing. 98% conviction rate.
Unlimited resources, unlimited ability to go after you, and you walk. On in essence. So let's see. I do hope he gets some time, and I hope it's some solid time.
I think it will. I think it will be.
He earned it. So the grim reality of Mexico's escalating cartel violence was underscored on Monday as 4 decapitated bodies were found hanging from a bridge. This horrific discovery comes amidst a surge of bloodshed that has claimed nearly 20 lives in less than 24 hours, according to authorities. Hey everyone, CrimeWire Weekly has moved to its own new channel.
We hope you've enjoyed this preview. To continue listening, please follow the link referenced in the description of this podcast.
Or simply search CrimeWire Weekly wherever you're listening.
And don't forget to follow the show so you can be alerted when new episodes drop.
Thanks for listening.